all your hurt, all your worries, all your sufferings turn to gold. That's the topic of tonight's Bible study. All your hurt, all your worries, all your sufferings turn to gold. You see, we're not victims. We're not victims of circumstance. We're not doomed to suffering and to just accept it as it is. I mean, in misery. We don't have to choose that. There was a saint who, they called him a martyr saint, who found himself in the cellar in the dungeon of a castle, along with a lot of other martyrs. And they were all around him. People were dying. They were crying and wailing in agony, dying in misery. And this was his home. This is where he found himself, as he himself was in misery and in immense pain and agony in this dungeon, filthy dungeon, left with no care, no love, nothing but brutal circumstance. But what did he say? He said, and yet amidst these sufferings, I found joy. I found joy and happiness deep in my soul. Jesus was with me. He filled my soul with with joy and passion. I don't recall the exact quote, but that was the essence of it. And that's perhaps a good metaphor for something we learned from de Caussade in his book Abandonment to Divine Providence. He writes, and let them both be aware that holiness is a means to eager acceptance of every trial sent to them by God. Notice the word eager acceptance. And we're talking about trials and tribulations. Eager acceptance, not whining and complaining and running. No, eager acceptance. Now that may sound radical, but wait until you find out why he says that. That's what's so fascinating about tonight's talk, is we're going to cover how is it that we can actually eagerly accept trials and tribulations. That's what this is about. And Caussade writes, and let them both be aware that the holiness means the eager acceptance of every trial sent to them by God. This is vastly superior to the enjoyment of all extraordinary circumstances. It is the philosopher's stone which changes into gold all their worries, all their troubles, and all their sufferings. Let them realize this, and then how happy they will be. And he writes, all I want is for you to carry on as you are doing and endure what you have to do. But change your attitude to all these things. And this change is simply to say, I will. I will to all God asks. What is easier? It reminds me of when the angel came to Mary and offered for her to be the mother of the Messiah, of Jesus Christ. And you know what she said? She said, let it be according to your word. Let it be according to your word. It's almost like the ultimate sermon in the whole Bible in those 4 or 5 words. Let it be according to thy word. 7 words. What an incredible sermon. If everybody would live by that sermon, let it be according to thy words. And I think that's what de Caussade is saying in his book, Abandonment to Divine Providence. Because Mary brought great suffering and joy into her life when she said those words. But at the same time, we're faced with trials and tribulations. We can't run from them. We can't hide from them. We have to deal with them. However, the way we deal with them is going to have immense consequences in our own life. And what Caussade is saying here is, all I am asking is for you to carry on endure what you have to do. You got to do what you have to do. You live the life you're living. The circumstances that we are living in are God's providence. But change your attitude to these things. Eagerly accept them. Eagerly accept them, even though they seem unappealing. And this change is simply to say, I will. Just 2 words, I will, to all that God asks. And how do we know what God asks? Our circumstances tell us quite a lot about that, because we're living in God's divine providence. Saint Teresa said, if I did not simply live from one moment to the next, that's what she's talking about, living moment to moment. If I did not do that, it would be impossible for me to keep my patience. I can see only the present. That's how she lived. She's a saint. I can see only the present. I forget the past, and I take good care not to think about the future. We get discouraged and feel despair because we brood about the past and the future. It is such folly to pass one's time fretting instead of resting quietly on the heart of Jesus. That's Saint Teresa. The teacher of the famous Saint Thomas Aquinas, one of the fathers of the Catholic Church, Saint Albert the Great urged all Christians, he said, commit every particle of your being in all things, down to the smallest details of your life, eagerly and with perfect trust to the unfailing and most sure providence of God. Trust. That's his message. Trust. 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 Commit every particle of your being in all things, down to the smallest details of your life, eagerly and with perfect trust to the unfailing and most sure providence of God. So when we're facing worries, suffering, misery, trust, believe, trust that God is with us, that this is God's will for our life, that he's with us to carry us, to hold our hand, and to lead us through the fires, to lead us through the floods, to be with us in battle, and ultimately lead us to victory. Similar exhortations to these can be found in the writings and sermons of every saint. These are people who spent their entire lives meditating on the will of God and serving God. Caussade says that everything in life is to be welcomed as an expression of the will of God. Everything in life is to be welcomed as an expression of God. So something good happens, that's the will of God. We thank God. We give. By the way, the Bible says, "In all things give thanks, for this is the will of God for you." In all things, that says it all. In all things give thanks, for this is the will of God for you. In other words, all things are the will of God. Whatever happens, this is the will of God for you, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And how are we to respond? Just like that, we give thanks. Is that insane to give thanks for trials and tribulations, for misery, suffering, worries, and hurt when we're hurting? Do we really want to give thanks for that? Yes, we want to give great thanks, for God knows what's best for us. Give our greatest, deepest thanks for his mercies and for leading us through the hard lessons of life so that we ultimately gain wisdom and take the right road at the end, go through the right gate at the end. The meanest incident. So everything in life is to be welcomed as an expression of the will of God. So we must accept, quote, accept what we very often, if we can't avoid it, we may as well just accept it. Don't fight it. Accept what we very often cannot avoid and endure with love and resignation things which could cause us weariness and disgust. Some things we just can't avoid it. It is what it is. And so accept it. Give thanks. In all things give thanks, for this is the will of God for you. God speaks to every individual through what happens to them moment by moment. These events that happen daily in our life, God is speaking to us through these events. These are guiding us. These are opportunities that are guiding us through life. We need to be paying attention to what's going on. The events of each moment are stamped with the will of God. Now, is that really, what if something bad happens? Many times bad things make us stronger and make us into the people we become, and make us, I cannot tell you the essays I've had students write of some of the most heart-wrenching and unbelievable things that they have been through. And yet they're thankful for them. these kids. They're kids who've been through things that people wouldn't believe, and that they are thankful for them because these things have made them who they are and have made them stronger and given them given them wisdom and strength to carry on through anything, that they can face whatever life brings at them because they've endured through trials and tribulations. I've seen it over and 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 over. Caussade was a very simple man. He was obsessed with one thought: the necessity of loving God and surrendering ourselves to Him completely. A few more thoughts here. From Abandonment to Divine Providence. Holiness is produced in us by the will of God and our acceptance of it. Holiness, that's what we're talking about here. Holiness is produced in us by the will of God and our acceptance of the will of God. So we want to accept the things that happen to us on our road to holiness. We don't want to resist, but in all things give thanks, for this is the will of God for you. What God arranges for us to experience at each moment is the best and holiest thing that can happen to us. Caussade writes, in all our moments are made productive by our obedience to the will of God, which reveals itself in 1,000 different ways, each of which successively becomes our immediate duty. Together they mold and perfect within us that new self. He's referring to Ephesians 4:24. And writes, determined by God the fruit of His grace and His holy will. As I have said, this fruit is produced, grows, and is fed by the stream of duties God puts before us. So sometimes we're faced by menial duties that seem unworthy or depressing, or just we don't want to do them. It's not what we want to be doing. And he's saying, this is God's will for us. This is our path to holiness. Maybe it has to do with humility. Maybe it has to do with obedience. But this is God's will. Reminds me of a famous book. I can't recall the name of it at the moment, but it was about Brother Frank or something like that. It's about this monk who he was given the duty in a monastery. His job was to wash the dishes and do other menial jobs, like the lowest jobs of anybody there. And yet, the book was something about the title was imitation of God, something I believe about the imitation of God, and that's what the presence of God. He believed that he'd pretend that God was there with him, which of course he was, but he kept awareness, like he kept an awareness that God was with him, and he was focusing on serving God joyfully all the time in these menial duties. And this guy became a saint. He became a holy, famous. I mean, he's greatly revered as many religious people look to him as an example of how to deal with tough circumstances, because of what he did, and how he found joy and holiness in the most menial of tasks. Caussade writes, God can, when He pleases, change all other obstacles into aids for spiritual progress. So that the obstacles and trials and tribulations we're facing, God can use these for our spiritual progress, to help us, for our good, to bless us. I don't know, if you look back as I look back over my life and many of the bad things that have happened and the mistakes I've made, I've learned lessons from those things. And so many other people have as well. Caussade writes, without Him, everything is nothing. Without God, everything is nothing. And with Him, nothing is everything. It makes all the difference. He writes, we must at all times, in all circumstances, say with St. Paul, Lord, what do you want me to do? So that state of prayer, ask and you shall receive. Pray, Lord, what do you want me to do? And it's helpful to have an awareness of who God is and His voice and how to recognize His voice. And that's a topic I'll discuss in the near future, because we need to make sure that that what we're hearing is truly the will of God, and not something that's against the will of God. So we need to understand His voice. In other words, God's not going to ask us to do something non-biblical, for example, or against His own will. Couple more thoughts from Caussade. He writes, and let them both be aware that holiness means the eager acceptance of every trial sent them by God. It is, now this is key, we said this before, it is the philosopher's stone which changes into gold all their worries, all their troubles, and all their sufferings. Count it all joy when trials and tribulations come upon you. Count it all joy. In all things give thanks, for this is the will of God for you. The good, the bad, the ugly, we accept it all, and we go forward. We go forward, do our duty, and find holiness, and ultimately find victory and find happiness. There's great happiness in the humility of accepting the will of God and fighting on. Good night. God bless you, and good night from the Midnight Bible Study.